There's people in my house right now, by the way, so you might hear them. Someone might come in the door, actually. So that's the reason I talk so quietly, by the way, because I live with people.
You have my card?
See? Told you. Hi, it's Julia. Nice to see you again. Do you like my sweater? I got it at a garage sale and it was only $2. Anyways, today I'm going to be talking about my Korean learning experience, plus some study tips, some tricks to improving your Korean quickly. And by quickly, I don't mean like a few days. Like, it's still gonna take you time because it's a whole language. It's still a process, you know, like anything. Like, you can't just like go into a calculus class and be like,
I'm gonna learn all this in a day.
Anyways, so like I said in my Q&A, I started learning Korean in high school. I actually took Korean for my language because I didn't want to take Spanish. I'm actually taking Spanish now in college. I did study Korean on my own. I didn't have a teacher because I was homeschooled, so I learned a lot of subjects mainly on my own. So yeah, I was homeschooled. I took my Korean, I taught myself. So these are all things that I did. It's important to note that not everyone learns the same way. So this is what I did to learn Korean, but it might not work for you. So it's totally fine if what I do doesn't work for you. And if it works for you, that's fantastic. But don't feel bad if the things that I do aren't working for you. Like, you try them and they just aren't working. How or what to study as a beginner? I recommend is you go in this order: alphabet, grammar, vocabulary. Number one, the alphabet. A lot of people will start learning Korean and they'll start by learning in Romanized Korean. Romanized Korean is when Korean is written out phonetically using an English alphabet. This, I don't recommend doing this because I know that when you start a language, you really want to know phrases. But if you actually want to learn Korean and you want to be good at Korean, then it is very important that you start with the alphabet and you master the alphabet. Now, that's not to say that you should be reading the alphabet, you know, you should be reading Korean fluently. Like, you should be reading it like you are a native Korean speaker. That's not what I'm saying. But, you know, if you don't start by having a really good knowledge of the alphabet, it's gonna be hard for you. But on the flip side, if you learn the Korean alphabet and you get to a point where you're very comfortable writing and reading the Korean alphabet, Korean's gonna be so much easier for you. The good thing about the Korean alphabet is very easy. It's super easy to learn. It takes probably a week to learn the Korean alphabet. Like, the rules with Korean are super easy. The rules for letters are concrete. With English, it's not like that. So it takes much more time to learn how to read English fluently, but with Korean, it's always the same. It's fantastic. It's great. But I wouldn't move on until you can read Korean. I think it's important. That's just how I feel. The second thing that I recommend learning is grammar. The reason that I think you should learn grammar before you start really like working on vocabulary is because the rules, again, are very simple. With grammar, they carry around into different like sentences and different scenarios about the same. So you can learn grammar and apply your vocabulary to the same grammar over and over again. So if you learn grammar before you start really working on vocabulary, then once you get to vocabulary is just, those are just words. Like, it won't take you that long to learn different words. And you can also learn words when you know grammar. You also learn how to apply those words because they are applied almost the exact same way throughout each sentence structure. So if you learn the alphabet, you can read sentences and then you can read the grammar. You'll know what the sentence is trying to say, and you just have to find what each extra little piece of vocabulary is, and then you're done. And then you can use context clues and your comprehension will go through the roof. It's great. So that's why I recommend doing grammar before vocabulary. The last thing that I think is really important is learning vocabulary. But I think what's cool about vocabulary is you can pick up vocabulary just like in your everyday life. You'll pick those up, and because you already know grammar, you already know how to apply these words to your everyday speech. That's what I recommend. I'll insert a clip right now. This is what I use this is how I study. This is actually my notebook for this year, so it's kind of blank, but this is how I lay out my notes. I have one page just for my lessons, and then I have a page for my vocabulary. I usually will spend a week learning about 10 words. I don't really go more than that a week because I'm lazy, but I make sure that I take quizzes so that I'm sure that I know it. That's what I do for my notes. Here are some tips for learning Korean. So the first thing that I recommend is you should write in Korean, like a lot. You should write in Korean all the time. Writing a journal entry. If you listen to K-pop, which I imagine you do because you're watching my videos and that's kind of like my thing, I would recommend writing fan letters. I know that sounds like really cringy and weird, but you have things that you're trying to get across through letters, so you're gonna have to study those things to learn how to say them. Don't go in there and think, I want to put this in my letter, but you don't know how to do it, so you just Google Translate it. Don't do that. Don't do that. Study it. Don't put it into Google Translate. It's probably wrong. Google Translate is not your friend. It lies to you. It tells you stupid things. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't put honorifics. Don't call your oppas and use punmar. They're probably older than you. So that's a great way to study if you write journal entries or you write letters. The second thing that I recommend is you should read Korean a lot. Literally read anything. Instagram posts, fan cafe posts. Even if you don't know what it's saying, you should read it. Read it like you know exactly what it's saying and you're reading it like the newspaper. If you mark down the words that you don't know and you just use those words as your vocabulary words, you'll see that like they're common words that they're gonna show up all the time, and you're gonna be like, wow, now I can understand so much more than before. The next thing that I recommend is textbooks. I know that not everyone can afford textbooks. There are, free resources. This is not free. I use elementary Korean for my beginner's Korean, and then I use intermediate Korean for my second Korean that I did. This is the workbook. These books are not super expensive, but they're not super cheap. And I wouldn't say, it really depends on the kind of learner you are. These books are kind of dense. So I wouldn't say that like for your elementary Korean to go with these. I would go with Talktomeinkorean's books for elementary Korean. Those are very good. They give you a lot of real world scenarios in them, and they also, they're so clear and concise, and they speak in a way that's so incredibly understandable. Those are great books. But if you can't afford textbooks, you're, a starving student like I am, you can go on Talktomeinkorean's site, and a lot of their lessons are just kind of like transcripts. They also have an app. That's what I use. I use their app, and it is great. It has like full transcripts of their lessons on there, and you can write them down, and you can like flip through them. If you already know something, you can skip that lesson. It's great. Another tip, listen to people speaking Korean, singing Korean, whatever. Listen to Korean. Get familiar with the way that people speak, the way that people pronounce things. It's all very important. If you want to sound as fluent as possible, you need to listen to how Koreans speak Korean. That's the only way you're going to learn. If you listen to a foreigner speaking Korean, like if I spoke Korean to y'all and you were like, I only watch Julia, she's the only person I watch who speaks Korean, and then you imitate me, let me tell you, you're not gonna sound fluent. Do you know why? It's because I don't sound fluent, okay? I don't, okay? I try my best. I sound like a foreigner speaking Korean as hard as they can. They're doing it very sincerely, but I'm not Korean. And I didn't grow up speaking Korean, so listen to Koreans speaking Korean. That is very important. You can do this in many ways. If you listen to K-pop, bam, that's number one. You did that already. There are a lot of foreigners who are really good at Korean though, like Yeongguk Namja, dude. The boy can speak. There's also Dave from the world of Dave. He's fantastic, you know. There's a lot out there. I'm so jealous. Anyways, yeah, listen to it. K-dramas. So if you use Viki, which is a popular K-drama site, right? It's K-drama watching. Oh, streaming. It's a streaming service, a K-drama streaming service. If you use Viki, you might know there's a learning feature. So some of their dramas are popular enough that they have gotten this learning feature on them where it'll put the Korean subtitles above the English subtitles, and you can watch with that. And if there's like a word that you don't know, you can click on it and it'll like bring up a definition. It's super useful. So there's also podcasts. Podcasts are a great way for you to like do your lessons when you're like in the car, or you're, you know, busy, you're painting or something, you know, herding cattle, I don't know. You know, you're just like busy and you don't have time to like read or write. You can do podcasts. So some of the podcasts that I recommend, again, Talk to Me in Korean has a podcast. It's great. There's a podcast for beginners that's called Learn Korean with David. That one is good for like learning phrases and stuff. Don't try to learn phrases if you didn't learn the alphabet. I'm watching you. There's also Iyagi. Iyagi is Talk to Me in Korean's other podcast, which is just like learning how to have conversations in Korean. That's very useful. And one that I think is really interesting, I don't know if this really would work if you're a beginner, like you're just learning, but there's this podcast called Sponge Mind, and what they do is they have two recordings of the same episode, but one is completely in English and one is completely in Korean. So the way you're supposed to use it is you're supposed to watch one of them and then watch the other one and see what you picked up and what you didn't. So I don't do that because I'm lazy. I just watch the Korean one, or I just listen to the Korean one and then zone out most of the time because I'm not paying attention. But that one's really cool. Something that I found really useful for my learning experience was using language apps. Now I use the Talk to Me in Korean Lessons app. That's super useful. I used a lot of a language exchanging apps, which is like someone who is a native Korean speaker who wants to learn English will post questions, and you as someone who is learning Korean as a native, whatever your language is, speaker posts questions, and then you kind of like respond back and forth. The two apps that I used was HiNative and HelloTalk. A disclaimer for those apps: sometimes you can get people who they don't have the best intentions. Not everyone's like that, but you know, it can be like that. So you have to make sure that you are being safe when you're talking to these people. Don't be gullible, because people are shady. It's international. So just be careful. But I found those very helpful. I used this app called Memrise for learning vocabulary. It's basically flashcards, but it was very interactive, so it was very helpful. It also gave you a lot of like pictures, so it helped you associate words with their actual meanings, so instead of just their translation. So that was really helpful for me. Yeah, I do recommend talking to people. I think talking to people is very important. It's good to have someone in your life who can correct you and tell you, oh no, you wouldn't use it this way, but you can use it this way, or I know what you're trying to say, this is the best way to say it. Okay, my camera cut off because I don't have any more space on my phone, but so let me just make this really quick. that's kind of everything that I have to say. This is just my conclusion. Definitely study Korean. It's very worthwhile. It's a really fun language to learn. It sounds really cool. The rules are great. They're super easy. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.